It's finally happening as the time is starting to come surrounding Bo Bichette as he has officially been put on a rehab assignment and his return seems imminent to the Toronto Blue Jays. We're going to break down what that means for the Jays this season, going forward, and into the offseason as a trade could happen for the Jays stars. Stay tuned for all that in this episode. But before we do, if you're part of the percent who aren't subscribed to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We're on the road to 14,000 subscribers. But we have some interesting things to discuss today. Obviously, Bo Bichette has been the name that has been talked about the most over the past couple of months. He's had the most disappointing season that nobody really expected. You think about coming into the season, we all thought that Bo Bichette had a chance to have a better season than Vladimir Guerrero Jr. A lot of fans out there were saying that they should extend Bo Bichette rather than Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And now the tide is completely turned and everything is completely changed regarding the Blue Jays and Bo Bichette, because we know reports have come out from John Heyman, from Bob Nightingale, all these different guys saying that, hey, Bo Bichette is going to be put on the trade block this offseason. But the most important thing is that Bo Bichette gets healthy. Now, whether or not the Jays are going to move Bo Bichette is up in the air. But what's not up in the air is the fact that he had a very disappointing season and that he has been injured for most of the year. And Keegan Madison dropped a story. You can see it here. A story on Bo Bichette's late season return, why it matters, and what he can represent again for 2025. And we do know, we had a video on it a couple days ago, that Bo Bichette came out and said that he wants to be with the Blue Jays and wants to win a World Series with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and wants to be with the Jays going forward. That doesn't necessarily mean that the Jays aren't going to trade him, but it does mean is that he is open to contract extension talks. I'm not sure the Blue Jays want to do that, but Bo Bichette is back and he was playing for the Buffalo Bisons, and he had an interesting day. But one of the funnier things is that you can see this here from Blake Murphy. Bo Bichette grounded out to Kevin Biggio in a AAA game. Good snapshot of 2024 Blue Jays baseball. And that's really what happened this season for the Toronto Blue Jays. It was a mess. The Jays started off with high expectations, and ultimately they all started to crumble. But we all know that. But what's important now is that the Toronto Blue Jays and Bo Bichette get healthy. And heading into the offseason here, you look at what he can do for the team. And one of the big question marks this season has been, once Bo Bichette returns, can he return to a form, or is he going to be a shell of himself? Because we know that he's led the AL in hits twice. This season, he's put up like a 70 OPS plus. He had a very, very rough season. Now, whether that's attributed to the injuries, the lack of winning, the lack of motivation, whatever you want to attribute Bo Bichette's struggles to, the point is for the Jays to make, whether it's make a trade, whether it's compete next season, they need Bo Bichette to be healthy, and that's something that he hasn't been able to do. And this is a very, very important step and a good step in the right direction. And Keegan gives some very interesting insight here. You can see this here. It says Bichette's return won't matter much to the Jays' record. Obviously, the Jays aren't going to make the playoffs this year. They're far from it. But if he finishes the season batting 230, let's say, instead of 222, that's not going to make the big difference. The big difference is that Bo Bichette needs to feel like himself again. He needs to be healthy, and he also needs to just be himself, because we know that when Bo Bichette is good, he's one of the best hitters in baseball. He has the best. Obviously, his defense has always been a question mark, but there's no question mark about him being one of the best hitting shortstops in baseball. And he needs to bring himself back to that. He needs to be healthy. And whether or not you're a fan of Bo Bichette, whether or not you want Bo Bichette traded, or whether you want the Jays to keep him next season and try to compete or even extend him, he needs to be healthy for any of those things to matter. Because if he's not healthy next season, his contract's going to run out, and the Jays aren't going to trade him when he's hurt, when his value is super low. And we saw in yesterday's game, obviously the Blue Jays beat the Mets 6-2 in a very fun game, but Bichette was with AAA Buffalo starting his rehab assignment from his latest calf injury. He went 1 for 3 with a single and played half a game at shortstop, and that's his first time playing in any sort of professional game in almost 2 months, which seems like it's been forever since we saw Bo Bichette in a Blue Jays uniform, but it has been a very long time since that injury, and the season has kind of flipped over. It kind of turned on his head ever since Bo Bichette went down. Now, there has been some bright spots we'll get into in a little bit, but the fact that he's coming back is very important. And John Schneider said some very interesting things recently about Bo Bichette. He said he probably would have had the longest offseason ever if he didn't get back playing. He would have been going crazy. He wants to push the envelope a little bit and see how he can finish it up. And he's obviously talking about that in light of him returning to the Bisons, because obviously the Blue Jays have nothing left to play for when it comes to winning games at this point of the year. There's only 20 or 30 games left. There's not many games left. Less than a month left of the regular season. So if the Jays want to go out there and they want to push Bo Bichette, it's probably not the best idea. But Bo Bichette wants to push himself. He wants to get back onto the field, because if they don't get Bo Bichette back, then you're heading into next season with, like John Schneider said, a very long offseason for Bo Bichette, and one that if he hadn't played that rehab game, and he could have took it easy, he easily could have said, hey, we'll just ramp it up in the offseason and be ready to start the season in 2025. He didn't want to do that. Now, whether that's because the Jays want to push him a little bit for trade value, whether they just want to see what they have, or whether it's because Bo Bichette really wants to get back out there, which I think is probably a mix of all three. He's back to playing, and that's not something we expected, especially with this little amount of games left. It's not like they're pushing for a playoff spot. They're doing quite the opposite. They're letting the young guys play, and we've seen a lot of the young guys shine really well. And Schneider said some more things, and it means a lot just in talking to him. I love the fact that he's getting back to it with the number of games we have left, like I just mentioned. But for him, he wants to get back here and use however many games he has to feel like himself. He wanted to do that in the second half, and then he got hurt. This will be big for him going into the offseason, knowing he finished healthy and hopefully finished well. So I suspect he's going to have maybe another couple of games with the Buffalo Bisons. Maybe not. Maybe he'll get called up sooner than that. But he is going to play for the Toronto Blue Jays this season. And there's going to be a few guys down the stretch that are going to play with the Jays this season. You think about the likes of Relvis Martinez, who's also back to playing on rehab assignments. I believe it's with the Bisons as well, because he was obviously suspended for PEDs. He's probably going to come back and play a handful of games before the season ends. You have Bo Bichette coming back. And the question mark now is, what does that mean for the other guys on the roster? You have guys like really Davis Schneider, and more specifically the shortstop position, Leo Jimenez, who Leo Jimenez has played very, very well this season for the Blue Jays. He came up, he struggled a little bit to hit. We know that his defense has been some of the best in the organization, especially at shortstop this year. He had a very, very good rookie year. But his OPS now, after another solid game yesterday, getting a hit, it's over 700. So if they want to continue to give the young guys chances like they really should at this point of the year, there's nothing else to play for, then keeping Leo Jimenez in the lineup one way or another would be good. But whether that's in the form of DH, maybe they try to play Leo Jimenez somewhere else, maybe they try Bo Bichette at second base. I doubt that's going to happen, but it would make some sense given the fact that you look at the current roster, and Davis Schneider was originally the second baseman, and he's kind of turned into a he had a good game yesterday. He's getting back to himself a little bit, but he's struggled heavily and mightily this season. So there's going to be some spots that hopefully start to open up. But when you're bringing Bo Bichette back and you're bringing a lot of these guys back, some of the older or some of the younger prospects that were getting a lot of runs, specifically Leo Jimenez, he would not have gotten the amount of run that he has if it wasn't for Bo Bichette's injury. So if there's any light in the fact that Bo Bichette was hurt this year, it's that we got to see what Leo Jimenez can do. And there is a case to be made that he could be not necessarily a regular everyday MLB player or infielder, at least in the Jays, but a very solid fourth, kind of a bench spot guy to be Bo Bichette's backup shortstop, or maybe even a Santiago Espinal role from a couple of years ago, or even last year when he was playing a lot. He was getting in a bunch of different positions. He was hitting the ball well for average. Leo Jimenez is a bit more power, a bit more pop than Santiago Espinal, but it'll be very interesting to see what happens with that. You look at the year, it's a very unfortunate year for the Blue Jays, and especially Bo Bichette, and you look at his stats, not what you wanted to see if you were the Blue Jays, obviously, heading into the year. On base percentage of 275. He has an OPS plus of 69, so 31 points below league average, which is not what Bo Bichette's doing at all. But the bright side is, even though he had a rough season, that's not what we're used to at all by any means. He's only 26 years old, and he's going to have the next couple of seasons, specifically next year at least, with the Toronto Blue Jays to hopefully bounce back unless they decide to trade him, because that 69 OPS is definitely going to improve. But let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on this. Do you want to see Bo Bichette return this season, or would you rather see the young guys play? We'll see you tomorrow.